Father, we're so thankful for your love and your mercies. We're thankful that we can be here today together to hear your voice, to have your angels speak to us, that we may know that we are in direct contact with heaven. Bless us as we continue to learn and as we continue to unlearn all the things that we thought we believed before. May your Bible, your word, speak to us, and may it be our only creed. We thank you. Amen. Today, we begin at last looking at the test of Jesus in the wilderness. 3 tests. And the reason we want to look at that is we all know about it. We know the outline. But since we have been studying the various parts of the gospel, I think if we start to put it together, we will see there's more in what happened to Jesus in the wilderness than we saw the first time around. Now, I want to mention at the outset that we're going to be looking at articles in the Review and Herald 1874. Now, the very year of these articles should tell us something very important. In 1872, just a couple of years before, something very important happened in the Adventist Church. James White and Uriah Smith wrote a little notice called The Principles, the Fundamental Principles. And what they said to begin with was, we're not writing something for our church members. They all know this. We're writing this for the world so they can know what we believe. We're not going to tell our church members what to believe. We believe the Bible. And we have a great unanimity. You remember that? Mm-hmm. In 72, there was one Adventist church, one belief, and everybody believed it. Great unanimity. So what we are reading now, 74, that's just 2 years, they still had that unanimity. And we are going to read the real plan of salvation as Ellen White was presenting it to the world, because all the Adventists already believed it and knew it. See? She was not instructing them, because you will notice, reading her old writings, she did not give references when she said Bible verses, because they all knew the references. Okay? The church has moved a long way from what God intended, and I could tell you lots of things that we don't do anymore that all the old-timers did and knew. But we're not going to do that. To begin today, I want to finish off first our introduction to the subject. We still didn't finish that. Then we'll just take 2 or 3 quotes, and then we'll be ready. So, the first place I want to read is 5T 293, and if you don't want to read the whole article, it's point 4. I hope you'll read it all. Matter of fact, I hope you'll start reading through all the books. So here we go. Here's the paragraph. Satan is constantly at work, but few have any idea of his activity and subtlety. Please pay attention to the few. Who are the few who know what he's doing? See? Continuing. The people of God must be prepared to withstand the wily foe. Now listen carefully. If you've never heard this paragraph before, it's going to stun you. Just pay attention here. This sentence. It is this resistance that Satan dreads. The resistance of the few. He dreads that resistance. He knows better than we do the limit of his power and how easily he can be overcome if we resist and face him. He knows how easy the few can resist him. Through divine strength. On my desk, I've got it in bold letters, without me, nothing. But with Jesus, Philippians 4, we have the strength. We have his strength. And the devil knows that. What can the devil do against Jesus? See? So all we need is Jesus. It says, through divine strength, the weakest saint. Is that me? I can identify with that. How about you? The weakest saint is more than a match for him and all his angels. Yeah. Don't leave here the way you came. The weakest saint, if that's you, okay. You're going to have to nudge me aside there, but the weakest saint is more than a match for Satan and all of his angels. So why do we go around with a long face? What is that all about? Yeah, that's right. We got over into unbelief, and you know what? That is fatal. We've got to stop that. We have to believe what Jesus is telling us. Therefore, Satan's step is noiseless. So you can't hear him coming. It's noiseless. His movements are stealthy. His batteries are masked. But I missed a very important sentence. I have to go back now and read what I missed, because we can't miss this sentence. We're more than a match for all of his angels, and if brought to the test, he, that is the Christian, he would be able to prove his superior power. Yeah, the few, the real Christians, the real Seventh-day Adventists. And I'm not going to give you a list what the real ones are. Somebody already wrote a book, said, will the real Seventh-day Adventists stand up? But that person did not understand all the tests either. But if that true Christian is put to the test, he will prove his superior power to Satan and all of his angels. What is that superior power? It's Jesus! You see, we keep looking at ourselves, and that's a terrible mistake. When we look to Jesus, there's the answer to everything. We've got to get Jesus into it. The church has departed from God, but the few have not. The few have not. All right, I think there's one more sentence here. He, Satan, does not venture to show himself openly, lest he arouse the Christian's dormant energies. He doesn't want us to know these things. You know, we have energy, but we're not using it. And so Ellen White says, dormant energy, the devil knows all about it. He knows what's in us. But if we don't use it, he says, I've got them anyhow. He doesn't around to arouse the dormant energies that will send him to God in prayer. No, now we're back to the pew, see? Who's God? Jesus. See, that's who we're headed for. Because the angel is here in his stead, and we have the power of Jesus right with us all the time. We don't have to wait a millisecond. It's right there. The angel has been commissioned by Jesus. You treat that person as though I was standing there right next to them. And you have the power to do everything I would do. See? Jesus said, lo, I am with you always, didn't he? That's what he meant. The power, not him in person. The power. And that's what we have been trying to talk about for about a dozen years now. What is the power? I think we're starting to get it. The power. Well, that's the first quote. I couldn't begin our series on the temptations until we understand a little bit more. There may be another two here. Let me see. Okay. Now this one I have for the people who still have not squared it away yet, what the Bible really teaches about Jesus. I don't want to insult anybody, but I just want to read what it says. This is in letter 58, 1906. Now, I give you that source because it seems to me we should read the original sources instead of the compilation. But I'm going to read you the compilation because it's easier to get to. 3SM 132. It's just a short little paragraph, but it says everything needs to be said on the subject. God did for us the very best thing he could do when he sent from heaven a sinless being to manifest to this world of sin what those who are saved must be in character: pure, holy, undefiled. That's who's going to heaven. And Jesus was sent to show us what it looks like. The person that's going to go to heaven. And he, having Christ formed within. Now here is the sentence. If this sentence was understood by everybody in the church, everybody would be the few. Here's the sentence. He, the Father, sent his ideal in his Son. His what? His ideal. You can't get better than that. That's God's ideal. That means Jesus was not just like us. Do you get it? If everybody in the church understood this, there would be no A.T. Jones followers. There would only be Bible followers in Jesus Christ. God said his ideal. And you finish the sentence yourself. He was not just like us. All right? I don't want to argue with anybody. I don't want to hear all the quotes. This one sentence is enough for me. And he bade men build characters in harmony with this ideal. Okay, let's go to Review and Herald, July 28th, 1874. Now, we are not going to leave these Review and Herald articles now until we're done with this series that she wrote. So if you want to read and study and hear the angel for yourself, by yourself, you can do it anytime you want, because you know where we're going now for the next several weeks. You don't have to wait for these meetings. You can get it for yourself, but we just want to be sure we're together. That's why we do it in the meetings. Okay. She begins this way. This is 1874. This was what every Seventh-day Adventist believed. Christ was not in as favorable a position in the desolate wilderness to endure the temptations of Satan as was Adam when he was tempted in Eden. The Son of God, what did they believe? Jesus was the Son of God. Because she never explains it. They all know it. The Son of God humbled himself and took man's nature after the race had wandered 4,000 years from Eden and from their original state of purity and uprightness. The who?
The race.
The race. How many humans do you know that are not part of the human race? Hold on to the thought, because she's going to do away with another group just now. Sin had been making its terrible marks upon the race for ages. And physical, mental, and moral degeneracy prevailed throughout the human family. 3 times she said, the human race, the human family. And she said, throughout. What does that word mean? That's all of them, doesn't it? Are there any exceptions? Are there some people in the human race who don't have the problem? Is there one? How come people say babies are born innocent? Aren't babies the way the human race starts? How can you be a member of the human race without being a baby? Do you see how illogical it is to say babies are born innocent? They're not sinners until they choose to sin. That's a ridiculous idea. Well, I don't want to get into all the reasons why it's not true. I'm just reading you a couple of words here. The human race, the human family. Now, so let's go on. When Adam was assailed by the tempter, where did the temptation come from? Satan. Is that internal or external? The temptation that started the whole mess was outside. It was not in Adam. It was not in Eve. It was outside. It was coming from Satan. When Jesus is tempted in the wilderness, where did the temptations come from? From inside or from outside? But the people saying Jesus is just like us, they say he had a pull to sin. Where did that pull come from? He had no sin in him. What are they saying? Ellen White is just destroying all that. None of the pioneers, none of the church members of 1874 believed the things that are being said today. And I can read you where she says it's going to come and why they do it and what they call it. And you all know what they call it. New light that the pioneers didn't know. Well, I want to tell you something. I don't want to get too far ahead of the pioneers because they knew a lot. They were instructed by God, and they all agreed. All right. When Adam was assailed by the tempter in Eden, he, Adam, was without the taint of sin. Please understand, that was the condition of Adam when the devil came to tempt him. Get that down. He stood in the strength of his perfection. That's human perfection. He was a perfect human being when the devil came to him. I want to ask you, was Jesus a perfect human being when the devil came to him in the wilderness? Of course he was. He was an absolutely perfect spiritual human being. Now, because he was a perfect spiritual being, that means he was a perfect human, because the flesh doesn't count. Do you understand that? The devil has taught a lot of people that because we have flesh, we're sinners before God. No, you're a sinner before God because you choose to sin, not because of the flesh. Okay? Let's understand these things. You know, we're just 2 paragraphs into this series on the wilderness. And she's destroying all the things that are not in the Bible. And she's not trying to do it. She's just saying the truth. The truth that all the Adventists believed in her time. So let's continue. All the organs and faculties of his being were equally developed and harmoniously balanced. So now she's bringing in his physical side as well as his spiritual. We're going to look at that. Christ in the wilderness. Now she's bringing it up to date. Christ in the wilderness of temptation stood in Adam's place. Adam's what place? In his perfection. Jesus never became a sinner. He's going to stand in Adam's perfect humanity to do what? In Adam's place to bear the test. He failed. What test did he fail? He did not maintain his perfection. So the question is, will Jesus maintain his perfection? That's the question. And almost no Seventh-day Adventist has understood that yet, but mostly the people who read A.T. Jones, and A.T. Jones did not understand this. I'm sorry. But Ellen White has the spirit of prophecy, not A.T. Jones. I do not follow A.T. Jones, and I don't think you should either. He had a lot of good things to say, but he also made a lot of mistakes, and Ellen White says so. And she called him on some. So be careful who you think is inspired. We'll forgive you for believing Ellen White was inspired. Okay, continuing. So what did Christ do? This perfect human, this perfect spiritual, sinless being in the likeness of sinful flesh, and the flesh doesn't count. He was a perfect human being. What did he do? He overcame. He did not fall like Adam did. Jesus stayed perfect, sinless, holy, pure. The person on the cross was still holy and pure. He never became sinner. He had our sin on him. Don't you ever make Jesus a sinner. It never happened. We've been told a lot of things that are not true. So he overcame in the sinner's behalf. Well, she just said it. He didn't overcome on his behalf. He had nothing to overcome. He overcame on our behalf, for us. 4,000 years after Adam turned his back upon the light of his home, separated from the presence of God, separated, get that word, separated from the presence of God, the human family. How many is that? The human family had been departing every successive generation farther from the original purity, wisdom, and knowledge which Adam possessed in Eden. He was pure, he was perfect in Eden before he fell. And Jesus was pure and perfect before he overcame. That's what Adam didn't do. Jesus never fell. So that means what he was before the test had to be perfect, because he was still perfect after the test. You get that? There is so much logic in what God does. If we just stop to think about it, everything works. Christ bore the sins and the infirmities of the race. How many times does she have to say it? The whole race, as they existed when he came to the earth to help man, in behalf of the race, with the weaknesses of fallen man on him. Oh, now wait a minute. Here comes A.T. Jones. I can feel him breathing down my neck here. What does that mean, weaknesses? Does that mean he was a sinner? Yeah, A.T. Jones says he was us. No, he wasn't. I'm sorry, Jesus was not us. He was himself. And he was a pure himself, holy in himself, perfect himself, which none of us can ever say without Jesus. What are the weaknesses? I'm going to come back to that. You think about it. Because here's the separation between the A.T. Jones people, the 1888 people, and the few. I'm going to read the Bible dictionary meaning of the word weakness. But I want you to think about it first. You think about what would be a weakness, but it's not sin. Okay? You think about it. You go to a dictionary, do whatever you have to do. He was to stand the temptations of Satan upon all points wherewith man will be assailed. Did you get the word? She changed the word. This is the word she uses when she's really trying to tell us, get away from your ideas. Don't use the word temptation. Use the word assailed. Because when we use the word temptation, we're saying it the way our grandmothers taught us. And our grandmothers were not theologians. Our grandmothers told us, oh, I know you want to eat that cookie. You're really tempted, aren't you? And you say, yeah. The word temptation doesn't mean you really wanted to eat the cookie. She ruined you for life. The word temptation means a test. There's a cookie there. Let's test you to see how you relate to that cookie. Now, you can go two ways with the test. You can want to do it, or you can say, I'm not going to do it, period. But your desire has nothing to do with the cookie being there. Somebody put the cookie there to test you. The word test. Satan tested Adam, and Adam failed. Satan tested Jesus, and Satan failed. And Satan comes to each one of us to test us. And the test has nothing to do with what you are going to decide. That's up to you. The way you go determines whether you are an overcomer or you're a failure. But the test stays the same no matter which way you go. Are you seeing the difference? So Ellen White did not use the word temptation here. She used the word assailed. And that comes from outside of you. Assailed. Adam was surrounded with everything his heart could wish. Everyone was supplied. There was no sin, no signs of decay and glorious Eden. Angels of God. Can you get into any story of the Bible without angels? You can't do it. Because they're part of the plan of salvation. You can't have a plan of salvation without them. Angels of God conversed freely and lovingly with the holy pair. The happy songsters caroled forth their free, joyous songs of praise to their Creator. The peaceful beasts in happy innocence played about Adam and Eve, obedient to their word. Adam was in the perfection of manhood. That's what Jesus was. He was the ideal of God in humanity. See? You have to keep the words together, the concepts together. God said his ideal, the perfect man. So Adam was perfect manhood in Eden, and Jesus was perfect manhood in the wilderness. Didn't Luke say he was in favor with God? Didn't he say that? Jesus was perfect. Adam was in the image of God, but a little lower than the angels. Okay, let's keep reading here. We're down to paragraph 5. We're moving fast today. We've got several weeks to get this done, to really understand the real plan of salvation according to what God and the angels told Ellen White to write for us. In what contrast is the second Adam? Are there two Adams? Yeah, 1, 2. 2 Adams. What does that mean? There are 2 races. We all were born in the fallen race. Shall I say it? We haven't read that yet, but that's the Bible and the fallen race. That means everybody. There are no innocents. fallen race. We were all born as fallen beings. And yes, you were fallen when you made your first, You haven't done any sins yet, but you were a fallen creature. We'll get around to that. We can't avoid this because thousands of people have really been confused on this. Two races. Well, if one is fallen, what is the other race? The redeemed race. The few. The ones that Satan dreads because if he puts them to the test, they will show their superior race. Read this over again a few times until you get what it's saying. Yeah, read it over. All right. So it says, since the fall, the race has been decreasing in size. Oh, Adam's going to really wonder what happened when he sees us. In size and physical strength and sinking lower in the scale of moral worth. We'll talk about that. She talks about this later, okay? Up to the period of Christ's advent to the earth. And in order to elevate fallen man, oh, I missed that one. I didn't put a red mark on that one. Fallen man, Christ must reach him where he was. He took human nature. He took humanity, not sinful. Human nature. People are always adding words where Ellen White didn't put them. He took human nature. That means he was a human. He took human nature and he bore the infirmities. That's the same kind of word as weakness. Maybe it's time for us to look at it. Jesus took the infirmities of the fallen race. Let's see what those infirmities are. If you look in a dictionary, especially the one that Ellen White used, the Webster, it says this: affliction, impairment, weakness, disorder, frailty. There's nothing there about sinning. Jesus, these are all physical, by the way. These are not spiritual words. This all has to do with your physical nature, your flesh. Jesus had the likeness of sinful flesh. He had the same kind of weakness that you and I have. He had to eat every day or things were going wrong. See? He had to drink water. He had to sleep at night sometime. The overnights he didn't, but he had to sleep. He was tired. He could be injured. He had all the weaknesses we have. But none of those weaknesses mean you're a sinner. You have sinful flesh, but that flesh is not what makes you a sinner. It is your spirit that makes you a sinner. If you have the Holy Spirit, you don't choose to sin. If you have the devil's spirit, you have a problem. It's called the carnal man. Now, I'm reading you what every Seventh-day Adventist knew when Ellen White wrote these things. She didn't have to explain any of this to them. They all knew. They were Seventh-day Adventists. So let's continue here. He took human nature, he became a human, and he bore the infirmities, the weaknesses, the frailties, the degeneracy of the race. He who knew no sin, she says it, he who knew no sin became sin for us. What does that mean? It doesn't mean he became a sinner. He took our place. He took our place to die, to pay the penalty. But he did not become a sinner to do that. He took our sin on him, and that did not make him a sinner. But his Father had to treat him as a sinner because we didn't have the sin anymore. He took it. Now, I just said a big mouthful, and I'm not going to explain it. Yeah, there's a whole lot in that half a sentence we don't have time to talk about yet. He who knew no sin became sin for us. He humiliated himself to the lowest depths of human woe. She says he kept going down lower and lower and lower, step by step by step, till there was no place else to go. He had reached the bottom of human woe. Now, you all know the answer. Now that he's down there, if he moves, what's the only direction he can go? Do you see it? He did that so no human could say, you can't save me. He says, you've never been lower than me. If you move any place with me, it's going to be up. See? Do you get it? It's going to be up. That means the worst person on this earth can be saved.
Amen.
She says, to bring him up, man, to bring him up from the degradation in which sin had plunged him. That means the lowest man. The lowest. No, I know you don't consider yourself the lowest. You consider yourself pretty bad, but you know there's somebody worse than you. You've been looking for him. But even if you were the worst, that's no excuse. There's no excuse. You can't say, I can't do it, because Jesus has salvation for every human that ever lived or will live. Everybody can do it. For it became him for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory. What's the word glory mean? The character of God. To make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Nobody can tell Jesus, oh, he doesn't understand. He hasn't done that. Oh, he does understand because he's done worse. Yeah, no sin. But he's understood real agony. He's understood real horror. He's understood real separation from his Father. He's understood things none of us are ever going to know. Nobody can say, you don't understand. We don't know who we're talking to. Wherefore, in all things. Have you noticed she doesn't tell you where she's quoting from? That's Ellen White, because all the Adventists knew the scriptures. They knew the quotes. They knew where it was in the Bible. She didn't have to tell them where she was quoting from. They could go right to it. They turned right to it in the Bible. This church used to be known as the Bible Church. Do you know they used to hold, I don't know if they still do it, hold contests to see who could go to the Bible, and they'd give a quote and you'd be right there. You could tell them where it was. Do you know Adventists used to enter those contests? And they always won. Nobody could give them a quote. They didn't know where it was. Do you think you read your Bibles? I don't think so. I don't think so, folks. I'm not insulting you. But you're not even up to the Waldenses yet. The children quoted all of John, all of Matthew, and big chunks of the Old Testament. The children! Because they wouldn't send them out in the world until they could do that. Because they gave away their Bibles, so they had to still be able to quote it when they had no Bible left. Who are Seventh-day Adventists? Oh, we're midgets compared to the giants of Christianity through the centuries. Wherefore, in all things it behooved him to be made like unto his brethren. This is in Hebrews, you know. The second and the fourth chapters are two chapters that A.T. Jones didn't understand. But he became the champion of those. In Hebrews 2, Jones says, the human race, that the Bible's talking about the human race. But the human race is not mentioned in Hebrews 2. And neither is Adam. And A.T. Jones, every time you read him in Hebrews 2, it says Adam. No, it doesn't. Adam is not in that chapter. The only name in that chapter is Abraham. And Abraham is not the father of the human race. He's the father of the few. The brethren. Are you getting this? Jesus is not ashamed to call them brethren, the few. Do you see it? Jones missed it. You don't have to. Here Ellen White is quoting Hebrews, and you, in the context, you have to see it. Wherefore in all things it behoved him to be made like unto his brethren, the few, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people, for that he himself has suffered, being tested, being tempted. He is able to succor them. You look the word up sometime. Succor. Them that are tempted, that are tested. Yeah, if you don't know what that word means, get it. It's really simple, but you have to see it. Satan had been at war with the government of God. What is the government based on? Law. So Satan was against the law of God since he first rebelled. His success in tempting Adam and Eve in Eden, introducing sin into the world, had emboldened this arch foe, and he had proudly boasted to the heavenly angels that when Christ should appear taking man's nature, he would be weaker than himself. Well, that's true. That's true. That human being is less than the angels. And Satan is an angel. So he knew that when Jesus came, that human being would be weaker than him, even though he was a perfect human being. So if a perfect human being didn't scare Satan, what do you think you do? Yeah. We can't scare Satan by ourselves. He doesn't care a single thing about us by ourselves. He has conquered billions of them. And he wasn't afraid of Jesus coming as a human. Did you get that? As a human. But he left out something, and we're leaving out the same thing. He exulted that Adam and Eve in Eden could not resist his insinuations. Remember the word insinuation? That's what he did in heaven. He insinuated. He didn't say it flat out. He insinuated. When he appealed to their appetite, the inhabitants of the old world he overcame in the same manner. Through indulgence of lustful appetite and corrupt passions, through the gratification of appetite, he had overthrown the Israelites. Now listen carefully. He boasted that the Son of God himself, he's talking about divinity. The Son of God, not a human. The Son of God, the divine Son of God. He boasted that the Son of God himself, who was with Moses and Joshua, was not able to resist his power. The divine Son of God couldn't get ahead of me. Let's see how she says it. And lead the favored people of his choice to Canaan. You see, Jesus delivered the people from the Egyptians. And he got them on the desert, and it only would have taken them about 11 days to get to Canaan. But what did it take? 40 years. And it wasn't even the original group. So the original group never got there. And Satan was boasting, even the divine Son of God couldn't deliver against me. Did you ever hear that before? All the 1874 people knew it. Do you see you don't know things that they did? I can show you a lot of things that we don't know today because nobody teaches it, that all the Seventh-day Adventists knew in their day. It's a different church. Are we understanding that yet? We don't have the Seventh-day Adventist Church of Allen White, James White, Andrews. None of those people. It's gone. Here's the way Allen White says it. For nearly all who left Egypt died in the wilderness. What does she mean, nearly all? I think we're going to understand how she uses the word few here. Two out of 1.5 million. And she says, nearly all. I would say that's a whole bunch closer to all of them except two. But she says, nearly all. Nearly all died. And then it's the part that hurts. And the devil laughs. Also, the meek man Moses. He didn't make it either. He was tempted to take to himself glory which God claimed. David and Solomon, who had been especially a favorite of God, he had induced to the indulgence of appetite and passion to incur God's displeasure, and he boasted he would yet succeed in thwarting the purpose of God and the salvation of man through Jesus Christ. He says, I'll get him because he's made himself a human. I know how to get humans. Yeah, the devil had a plan. Are we beginning to see that God has a plan? The plan of salvation is not what we were told. Believe in Jesus and go to heaven. That's not the plan of salvation. In the wilderness, Christ was without food 40 days. Moses had on special occasions been thus long without food, but he felt not the pangs of hunger. He was not tempted and harassed by a vile and powerful foe, as was the Son of God. He was elevated above the human. He was especially sustained by the glory of God which enshrouded him. So when Moses went through the test, he wasn't just a human. Are you getting that? He was sustained by the power of God. But Jesus had to do it as a human without being held up by divine power. Because Jesus came to the planet to show what a human can do, not what God can do. He came to prove to you and to me what I can do. And when I say, no, I can't, Jesus had an advantage. That's what A.T. Jones taught, and that's what the 1888 people teach. He didn't have an advantage. He was just like me. There's no advantage involved here. Jesus did everything as a human. And when you say, oh, I can't, that's too hard, you know what you're saying? Jesus is a liar because he said I can't. Are you calling God a liar? Well, that's kind of a strange thing, isn't it? You remember last time, that's what she said, that's really strange. How could a Christian go around calling God a liar? Satan had succeeded so well in deceiving the angels of God. Oh, this is more than humans now. He has deceived God's angels, pure holy beings. He deceived them. And in the fall of noble Adam, that he thought that in Christ's humiliation, he'll be successful in overcoming him too. He's not even an angel. He's just a human now. I'll get him. He looked with pleased exultation upon the result of his temptations and the increase of sin and the continued transgression of God's law for more than 4,000 years. He had worked the ruin of our first parents and brought sin and death into the world. He had led to ruin multitudes of all ages, countries, and classes. He had, by his power, controlled cities and nations. He's trying again today, and I better not say too much more, until their sin provoked the wrath of God to destroy them. And there's another bunch of people she just wiped out, the people that say God does not destroy. She said they provoked the wrath of God to destroy them by fire. Now fire was the instrument. Fire doesn't go around killing people by itself. Okay? By fire, water, earthquakes, sword, famine, and pestilence. These are all things to be used. By his subtlety and untiring efforts, he had controlled the appetite and excited and strengthened the passions to so fearful a degree that he had defaced and almost obliterated the image of God in man. His physical and moral dignity were in so great a degree destroyed that he bore but a faint resemblance in character and noble perfection of form to dignified Adam in Eden. And I know he's going to be shocked when he sees us. Woo, what's that? I did that to the human race. At the first advent of Christ, Satan had brought man down from his original exalted purity and had dimmed the fine gold with sin. He had transformed the man, created to be a sovereign in Eden, to be a slave. That's the whole human race. When we were all born, we were born into slavery. Every one of us. And we still haven't understood it. Because the devil gets quiet and pretends we're not slaves, but he has all humans as slaves anyhow. Until they're delivered. Yes, every human has to be delivered. Every human. The halo of glory, here's another thing that people don't seem to understand. They could say it, they can hear it 10 times a day and still not know what it says. It says the halo of glory. The halo of the character of God. The halo of glory which God had given holy Adam. Adam was a holy spiritual being. This was given to Adam, covering him as a garment. What covered Adam? A robe of light. A robe of light. Photons. A symbol of God's kingdom of light. Now this is important, listen. It departed from him after his transgression. The light was gone. You remember the Bible says he looked and he says, oh, I'm naked. Oh, you don't have any clothes on. How come they knew that? The light was gone. I want to ask you this, and I've asked of any number of people who think babies are born in a sin, and they have nothing to say. I'm sorry. When the first baby was born, did he have a robe of light? Why not? Because he was a fallen human being. His parents had transgressed for him, and although it would not cause him to die eternally, he was still a sinner without committing a single sin. Yeah, I know where people go immediately, they say, but sin is a transgression of the law. Yes, Adam is the transgressor for the race. Romans 5:12, and that is not Roman Catholic anything. Yes, I know the people that don't know theology say, oh, but that's original sin. That's Roman Catholic. I'm sorry, those people don't know what they're talking about. Ellen White says it 3 times. Adam committed the original sin. That means the first one. Is anybody going to disagree with that? He and Adam and Eve are the ones that did it. And in Genesis 5:1 it says, he called their name Adam. Come on, let's stay in the Bible. You have to stop listening to all these wannabes that get out there and think they're theologians. They're rabbis. They know more than the pioneers. They know more than anybody. Ask them. No, I can talk like that because I don't name names. I know names, but I don't do that. I think it's wrong to call a person a name when they can't defend themselves. But I know what some people are saying out there, and I don't go around listening to the people on the web. I don't look at the web. I'm sorry. I have a better place to get information. Continuing. We have to close here pretty soon. Let's see how Ellen White finishes her thought about this garment. The light of God's glory could not cover disobedience and sin. Is it that plain? Does that explain why none of us have a robe of light? God can't give it to us yet. We still have the sinful flesh, and every now and then we pay attention to it. We can't afford that. We've got to stay in the Spirit. Galatians 5:17. In the place of health and plenitude of blessings, poverty, sickness, and suffering of every type were to be the portion of the children of Adam. The who? Come on, babies are born innocent. It says the children have the problem because of Adam. It's right there in black and white. The children of Adam. Satan had, through his seductive power, led men to vain philosophy. And that's what Jones brought into this church. And unfortunately, so did Wagner later. Now, they both said the truth in 1888. We can't take that away. God gave them a message in 1888. We mustn't give that away. That message was justification by faith in the surety which is made manifest by obedience to all the commandments of God. And you know what Jones changed it to in a few years? Righteousness by faith. I'm sorry, that was not the 1888 message. He left the 1888 message himself. Every Babylonian church teaches righteousness by faith. Doesn't that give you a question? You mean to say they're teaching the true gospel? How's that possible? They teach you don't die. They teach Sunday's the Sabbath. They teach all the lies that Satan says. That's what they teach. But they teach the true gospel. Come on. The true gospel is justification by faith. Ellen White says it's the third angel's message in verity. Justification by faith. And it's the only thing she ever approved of what Jones and Wagner said. That's right. You can read her writings from the first all the way till she died. And she never says they taught righteousness by faith. Never. So, vain philosophy. What does vain philosophy teach? You bring it all the way down to the bottom. You go all the way back to Socrates. And Plato, who was his student, tells us what it was. The beginning of understanding philosophy is skepticism. Don't believe anything until you prove it. How are you going to prove God? Well, a philosopher can't do it. So they're never going to believe it. That's vain philosophy in the Bible. We must not become philosophers. It's too late, I know, for me to say that, because that's what our PhDs are. They have philosophy degrees. Did you know that? They're Dr. So-and-so because somebody got into the letters of Ellen White, and now they have a doctor's degree because they can tell you what Willie White said to Ellen White. Yes, and I'm not making that up. I can take you to the person who wrote that. And he got a doctor's degree for it. PhD, philosophy. And I'm not going to get on that subject because Ellen White explains it thoroughly. We went the wrong way when we sent our men to the schools of the Philistines. Vain philosophy. To question. That's the word for skepticism. She understood these things. And finally, to disbelieve in divine revelation and to the existence of God. And that's where they all go. He could look abroad upon a world of moral wretchedness and a race exposed to the wrath of a sin-avenging God. You can't fool Satan. He knows sin is going to be destroyed, and he knows who's going to do it. Oh, he laughs when he sees Seventh-day Adventists falling for all these weird things people bring around. With fiendish triumph, he had been successful in darkening the pathway of so many and had led them to transgress the law of God. He clothed sin with pleasing attractions to secure the ruin of many. I think that's all we have time for today. I want to finish the thought of what we did today with something we all know now. Maybe we didn't know it 10 years ago or 15 years or 20 years ago, but we know it now. You can't run from it. You know it now. God requires obedience to the 10 Commandments. And Satan says, you can't do it. Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to live for? Who are you going to follow? Are we going to call ourselves Christians and not believe anything that Jesus tells us? I think it's time we start believing. Now, it's going to get you in trouble with the organization because they will kick you out. I'm sorry to say that on the web, because I know there are people listening to the web no matter what anybody says. And I'm not talking about listening to the web. That's fine. You listen all you want. Your ears can't be fooled, but your eyes can. What happens on the technology is too fast for your brain to pick up through your eyes. So the brain is fooled and it thinks it's seeing reality. Yes, you get in front of technology and you are fooling your brain. Your ears can't do that to you. The brain picks up the sounds and it puts a value to the sounds and it puts it in places in the brain so you won't forget it. And when you listen to something, you're in good shape. You have to decide what you want to believe. But you can do it. Your brain is able to do that. You can't do that with your eyes feeding you false information through technology. Your brain can't handle it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go study some physiology someplace. If you put a sheet over the screen and listen, that's great. You're protected. God has protected you. But if you sit there looking, the devil's got you every time. I'm sorry to say that without explaining it. But we better start getting smart about some of this. The devil knows exactly what he's doing with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the people who call themselves reformers have jumped from the kettle into the pot. It's the same thing. I'm sorry. But Jesus is telling us the real plan of salvation here, the way it really works. And we're not even into the temptations yet. We're just into what Ellen White said to the people that everybody agreed on. They all knew. And now they're going to move into the temptations. And they're still all going to agree. Let's see how we do. Father, this world has changed so much since Adam and Eve were pure. It changed immediately with that first child, the world's first murder. And it's gone downhill from there. We think things are going bad now. We haven't seen anything yet. We're going to get back to the really bad days. Help us. Because only the few are going to stand. Only the few will know that we have angels that will not allow Satan and his evilness to come to us. The few will know, no matter what happens, we will see Jesus face to face. And we will live eternally with heavenly beings who have never sinned. And we will know nothing but joy and blessings. Help us to realize there's some value to that. Help us put our eyes in the right place. Amen.